The Disappearing Man. This story comes from a woman named Julie who lived in a small town in Oregon. She swears every word is true. It started on a freezing night in December. Julie was driving home from work on a lonely stretch of road surrounded by dense woods. It was the kind of road where you rarely saw another car at night. Her breath fogged up the windshield as she drove, the heater in her old car struggling to keep up. She was about 20 minutes from home when she saw him, a man walking along the side of the road. He wore a thin hoodie, ripped jeans, and no shoes. No shoes. That was the first thing that sent a chill up her spine. As she got closer, she realized something was wrong. He was walking too smoothly, his movements almost robotic, like he was being pulled along an invisible track. His head was down, and his arms swung just slightly out of sync with his steps. Julie slowed her car instinctively. Something about this man made her skin crawl, but it was below freezing. He'd freeze to death out here. Against her better judgment, she pulled up beside him and rolled her window down just a crack. "Hey, are you okay? Do you need a ride somewhere?" she called. The man stopped walking. Slowly, without moving the rest of his body, his head twisted toward her. His face was pale, eyes sunken deep into his skull. But the worst part? His mouth. It was stretched into a grin, wide, too wide, like it had been pulled back with fish hooks. His teeth were small and sharp, lined up perfectly like a doll's. Julie's blood turned to ice. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to drive. She yanked the window up and slammed her foot on the gas, her tires kicking up gravel as she sped off. But in her rearview mirror, he was still there. He hadn't moved. He still stood in the exact same position, watching her, that horrible grin never fading. She didn't stop until she got home. Julie locked every door and window, checking them twice. She told herself it was just some weird guy, maybe on drugs, and tried to calm down. But that image of his face wouldn't leave her mind. A few hours later, she was lying in bed, her heart finally settling, when her phone buzzed. A message. It was from an unknown number. "Why did you leave me?" Her stomach dropped. There was no way. No one else had been on that road. She hadn't seen him holding a phone. Hadn't seen him do anything except stare. Another message came. "I see you." Julie sat straight up in bed, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlight outside. Slowly, almost shaking, she turned her head toward the window. Her breath caught in her throat. He was standing outside, directly under the streetlight, still grinning. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him, at least 10 other figures stood in the shadows, their shapes barely visible, but their eyes, dark, hollow pits, shone in the dim light. Julie lunged for her phone and called the police. By the time they arrived, the figures were gone. No footprints in the snow. No sign anyone had been there. The officers looked at her like she was crazy, but they did a sweep of the neighborhood just in case. Nothing. She barely slept that night. The next morning, she told her neighbor, a woman in her 70s, about what had happened. The old woman listened, her face growing paler with every word. When Julie finished, the woman took a deep breath and said, "You're not the first." She told Julie that years ago, people in the town had seen the same man, always at night, always on that road. But it wasn't just one man. It was a thing, a creature that took on human form. Those who stopped for him, well, some of them were never seen again. Julie's blood ran cold. She never drove that road at night again, and she never saw him again. But sometimes when she's out late, she gets messages from unknown numbers. "Come back. I miss you. I see you." The shadow at the cabin. In 2003, my uncle David bought a small cabin deep in the woods of northern Maine. It was a quiet, secluded place, perfect for weekend getaways and hunting trips. He wasn't the first owner. The cabin had been sitting abandoned for nearly 20 years, but it was still in decent shape. The locals, however, told him to be careful. They never outright said the place was haunted, but they told him stories. People who camped near the cabin spoke of strange sounds in the woods at night. A few hunters had even claimed to see a figure standing at the cabin's window, though the place had been empty for decades. David laughed it off. He wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. The first few weeks at the cabin were uneventful. David fixed up the place, replaced the broken windows, and brought in some furniture. He even spent a few nights there alone, and nothing strange happened. Then, one night in early November, things changed. David had invited a few friends for a weekend hunting trip. The first day went as planned. They spent hours in the woods, came back to the cabin to cook dinner, and stayed up late drinking and telling stories. At around midnight, they all went to bed. The cabin was small, just 2 bedrooms and a living room. David took one room, his friend Mike took the other, and their 2 other friends, Jake and Rob, slept on the couches in the living room. Sometime in the middle of the night, Jake woke up to the sound of footsteps outside, slow, deliberate steps circling the cabin. He sat up, listening. The fire in the fireplace had died down, leaving only a faint orange glow. Then came a knock. Just one. Soft, almost hesitant. Jake froze. He glanced at Rob, who was still sleeping. He thought about waking him, but didn't. Maybe it was just a branch hitting the wall, he told himself. Then the knock came again, this time louder. Jake stood up slowly, careful not to make a sound, and moved toward the window. The front porch light was on, but it barely lit the darkness beyond. He couldn't see anything. He waited, his breath shallow. The footsteps started again, moving toward the back of the cabin. And then, silence. Jake stood there for what felt like an eternity before finally climbing back onto the couch. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, he told the others what he had heard. They shrugged it off. Probably an animal, they said. Maybe a deer. But Jake knew better. That evening, as the sun went down, David and Mike decided to check the woods behind the cabin. The ground was damp from rain the day before, so if anything had been lurking around the cabin, there would be tracks. And there were. Large, deep footprints in the mud. Not human, but not quite animal either. The shape was wrong. Long, narrow, with claw-like impressions at the tips. The tracks led from the tree line to the back of the cabin, and then stopped as if whatever had made them had simply vanished. That was enough to put everyone on edge. That night, no one slept well. At around 3 a.m., Rob woke up screaming. He swore something had been standing over him as he slept. He described a dark figure, tall, with long arms and hollow, empty eyes. The others calmed him down, but no one slept after that. On the final night of their trip, they all agreed to stay awake together. If something was outside, they wanted to see it. They turned off all the lights and sat in the living room, watching the windows. Hours passed. Midnight came and went. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., the knocking started again. This time it was louder, more insistent. A pattern. 3 knocks, then silence. 3 more. Silence. David grabbed his rifle and slowly approached the door. He motioned for the others to stay back. The knocking stopped. He hesitated, then reached for the doorknob. He threw the door open. Nothing. The porch was empty. The woods beyond were silent. Then, just as David was about to step outside, Jake screamed, "Look at the window!" Everyone turned, and there it was, a shadowy figure standing at the bedroom window, just behind the thin white curtain. It was tall, with unnaturally long arms that reached the floor. Its head was tilted slightly, as if watching them. Then it moved. Not away from the window, but through it, melting into the wall, vanishing into the darkness of the room. The men scrambled for their bags, throwing on their jackets, grabbing their keys. They didn't even bother packing. Within minutes, they were in the truck, speeding down the old dirt road, leaving the cabin behind. None of them ever went back. David sold the cabin a few months later to an older man who wanted a quiet place to retire. But just last year, I found out something terrifying. The new owner disappeared. His truck was found in the same spot David used to park. His belongings were still in the cabin. The table was set for dinner. But he was gone. No signs of a struggle, no footprints, no blood. Just gone. And the cabin? It's abandoned again. The locals say strange things still happen there. Lights turning on at night, figures at the window, knocking at the door. Whatever lurks in those woods isn't finished yet, and it's still waiting.